Welcome to the All Things Circular podcast, your gateway to the circular economy. Hosted by industry experts Victoria Darcy and Rich Bolger. Every episode is proof that circularity isn't just good for the planet. It's a smart business decision. Our mission is simple: to empower, to inform, and to show you how to make the circular economy work for you.
Hello and welcome to the All Things Circular podcast, coming to you live from Las Vegas. I'm Vic Darcy.
And I'm Rich Bolger.
We are delighted today to have a super guest with us. This is Claudia Freed. I was privileged to be part of a ladies' luncheon where Claudia gave the keynote, and what she's going to talk about, what we're going to talk about, I really hope you find as inspiring as I do. So Claudia, please, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to the two of you right now and to your audience. As I mentioned in the luncheon, I was born and raised in Argentina. I come from a family of educators, and that is why it is so central to my experience, the conversation about education. I came to the United States the first time when I was 17 years old. I came as an exchange student to live in Lafayette, Indiana. And one of the very interesting things that marked my journey in the United States was the experience that we will talk a little bit later about how do we define a journey. When I came to the United States, I had no idea that one day I will be here speaking with you at a very exciting time in the industry, but never forgetting that I came to learn, to be part of a bigger story. And here I am, the CEO of an organization that has a very special meaning in my life.
So Claudia, please tell us a little bit about EAL Green. I mean, the ethos of this organization is just phenomenal, and the work you do is so empowering to hear about, and it's completely circular. So it's perfect for our podcast. So please tell our listeners a little bit about EAL Green.
EAL Green is a nonprofit organization. We were founded 42 years ago. So when we think about the context of the industry, what circular economy now means, and ESG, or the environmental, sustainable, and governance principles, are even a bigger umbrella, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we have been active in that field for a very long time, and in some cases before even realizing. But if I can take you back to the story of how EAL was founded, there were two sales people, they were friends, who had gone to college on what they like to say, other people's money. They were able to go to college. In fact, in one case, a family had lost their son in one of the wars. I think it was the Korean War. And the government paid a small stipend in the insurance. They no longer had a son, but the boy that lived in the farm next to theirs in Kansas received a small scholarship to go to Knox College. And at that age, Swede was his nickname. Swede said, "When I become famous one day, I will pay it forward." So the ethos, EAL, the concept of how to help others, in this case in education, was born at that young age. So things that we experience when we are in our early teen years or even in adulthood can set the direction for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Does EAL have a meaning?
Yes, excellent question. So back to the idea. When EAL was started, it was called Assistance Limited. Because when you are an entrepreneur and a startup, which is what's happening in the door, on the next door here at the RLA conference, startups that are being introduced to the public, the idea that Assistance Limited was going to be the name was because the goal there was to save the world and help everyone. Soon after we started, probably 6 years into it, somebody said, well, I think we need to focus. And we talked earlier at the luncheon today about the value of focusing your business so that you can actually solve a problem. Educational Assistance Limited was then born in 2017 as we embrace circularity, sustainability, and the emphasis that when you are able to find a home for products that would be considered surplus or excess, you're really becoming green or more sustainable. And so we rebranded to be called a simple EAL Green organization. And we're proud of the name because we were able to keep the history a little bit.
So one thing, before we kind of more go into how the nonprofit operates, what I also loved about your keynote today was setting an intention. And how have you set an intention, the outcomes of setting an intention? Because it's really quite a powerful message, particularly as we're talking about the circular economy.
Correct.
Because it's not just individuals that need to set intentions, it's businesses that need to set intentions. So would you like to just explain to our listeners a little bit about sort of why you brought that up? Because it was wonderful and enlightening.
I appreciate that, because in preparing for the keynote with this audience, where everyone is somewhat familiar already with the concept, but a good idea stays a good idea unless you can roll it into a plan or an action. And what we talked today about was the importance of having a set of principles. And we begin with the recognition that you need a routine, and that the routine can allow you to then develop a discipline which you can then focus on solving a problem. And then that is when you gain a level of excellence. And so this idea of intention, it is very clear, because in 1982, the then CEO of Grainger, David Grainger, decided that his intention was to try to solve a problem with excess inventory. And the intention was that he declared that it was acceptable to find a solution, provided that the company will continue to focus on doing what they do best, the largest distributor of MRO materials. So the intention of recognizing a problem is because it presumes that you are willing to then put the energy in solving the problem. That's where the value of intention is.
Yeah, I love that. As part of the masterclass, Rich taught a masterclass earlier along with Peter Evans, who obviously is one of our podcast team. And Peter talked, I don't know if you remember this, Claudia, he talked about frontier firms and follower firms. And what I think is really interesting is those frontier firms have all set intentions. And they've set intentions and they've gone with those intentions. And ultimately, they're making a success because of that.
Let me share another experience. Sometimes, and I'm sure it has happened to you as well, Rich, when you are in the process of gaining knowledge or acquiring an experience, and we are part of a narrative, we are a character in a story, we are protagonist. And it's not until we have the chance to look back and say, I was part of putting that intention or that solution in place. So often I am asked, are you the owner of EAL Green? No, I'm not, because it's a charitable organization. But I am what they consider sort of the founder class. Yeah. So I was one of the initial characters in the story. And there were three characters. There was a company that had the good intention to find a solution for their surplus materials. There was a small college that had an intention to enable a student to go to college and to save a little money. That was their stated intention. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time. At that time, I didn't have any idea that this moment will rewrite my story. And you can look back and say, what were the conditions for a solution, which today we call the circular economy? Yeah. That was so captivating to me then, and it continues to be.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And I love the purpose and the drive that you have to attacking the educational needs of children today. Talk to me about the tactical elements of exactly how EAL Green finds value in things that people no longer want. How does that product get turned into the ability to go through and offset education, or as you said earlier, use other people's money to pay for education, or one person's unwanted thing, to find value to help foster something that a lot of people desire, and that's to make our children better tomorrow?
Absolutely. The model has evolved, because in 42 years, you have to adapt, you have to grow. So I can start from what the engineers call re-engineering the concept. So I can start from the today and go backwards. So today we are digitally transformed. We have been now in Oracle, NetSuite, ERP partner. So we really now have implemented technology that enables us the tactical model. But when we started, the model was simply to narrow the products that we could create value from, thinking about the college infrastructure. So we are thinking about systems related to a college campus. Therefore, we don't really process retail products necessarily. So these are industrial pieces of equipment, hand tools, HVAC equipment that sits on the top of the rooftop of a building. These products began to be the result of leaner, faster, better supply chains. As if you recall, all the improvements in supply chain in the 1980s started to generate surplus materials. So we focused on solving that problem. And we found that colleges and universities were a good partner for creating the demand. So we had the supply, the donors that were looking to get rid of all this product, and the demand for the colleges and universities. And what we now do with the product is 3 channels. The first channel uses reuse. So our warehouse team, by the way, we're only 12 individuals, and we are now running a $6 million company.
Wow.
And we keep it intentionally low because then every penny that we use for scholarships. We have 2 facilities, one in Rockford, Illinois, and one in Carlsbad, California, where the product comes in and we will inspect it, and based on condition and application, so it could be a matrix of something that can be reused on a college campus that is in good condition. That immediately goes to the reuse channel. The tactical thing we didn't talk today about is that a product comes in, and if we decide to list it for the college or the university, the college will pay 20 cents on the dollar for that $1,000 MSRP snowblower.
I mean, it's just the economics of that, particularly for an...
Everybody wins.
Yeah, well,
Yes,
of course they do.
exactly.
And also,
That
it's
is
an
exactly
educational
right.
institution as well. So, absolutely.
And the second channel will be if a product cannot be reused on a college campus, we will try to resell it, auction it, repair, repackage, all the number of activities that are very critical and central to circularity.
And that's no mean feat because they're complex processes. It's, you have to know what you're doing. And you spoke earlier, Claudia, about the transportation systems that you've had to develop and put in place to make sure that's working optimally so that you're not wasting
Absolutely. Energy. So when we are transporting donations from Florida to the Midwest, we will use intermodal. So we will do the most economic freight, and then we'll put it on a train, and then it comes over here for the last mile. We will partner with our freight carriers on backhauling. We will use smart routes. We are very concerned as well with making sure that we're tracking sustainability on the shipping side of things.
Yeah. Brilliant. So I sidetracked you. And the third one?
And the third one is we discovered that the very donors that were giving us the very good product were also beginning to be concerned with packaging.
Yeah.
So we needed to also demonstrate that our own operations were efficient. And the first investment that we made was in changing our forklifts to e-battery. And then from there, we have balers in both our facilities. The interesting thing, I don't know, Rich, if you saw any case studies during your the last 5 years, but one of the things that we noticed was that pre-pandemic, we had to pay recyclers to come and get our products, paper products, pallets, and plastic. And the initiative of one of our team members in one of our warehouses, we said, what if we start using the balers and begin to accumulate? We have 60,000 square feet of facility in one of our locations until we get enough volume. So we now can get a ton or a trailer of paper goods, paper product that is baled, ready to go to a recycling yard. And we are now able to almost fund a full-time equivalent from our recycling activities.
Amazing. Economies of scale.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. Everything that touches a repair loop has a cost to reuse. Everything has a blended benefit. And I have seen some companies go through and turn what people consider trash into revenue. And you hit on a couple things that are smart. If you have to go through, if you have a pallet of stuff, paper that you want to get picked up, oftentimes someone's got to go through, hire someone, pay to get the truck to go through and pick it up. But if you're able to go through and maximize the space of a tractor trailer, say,
Exactly.
now it's economical. We'll give you a full tractor trailer of this specific thing. And that company would go through and pay to acquire it, to recycle or make the next new material. We talked about jeans being turned into fab bricks earlier
Exactly.
today. Being able to go through and leverage and solve the equation of, well, if the cost to reuse is too high, there's a benefit. How do we reduce the cost? Aggregate more stuff to fill a truck is a very smart way to do that.
And the focus that we talked about earlier comes from that, recognizing that you understand the entire ecosystem that we function. This is no longer just do less bad.
Yes.
This is work smart, collaborate, know the materials that you are handling. It took us a few years at the very beginning. We were accepting all kinds of things. And then we started to really notice that we were very, very good at certain commodities or at certain products. And what do you do with the rest? So we developed over the years a lovely network of other charitable organizations and other partners. So when someone during the pandemic, the very beginning of the pandemic, we received calls from the airline industry.
Okay.
And people wonder, what do airlines have to donate? Well, if you have been lucky enough to be upgraded to first class, rarely, but it happens. What do they give us? Lovely food to eat. But when no one is flying, and certainly not too many business individuals flying, there was a particular airline that had 64,000 servings of yogurt. EAL does not, by a decision that we made, is one of the categories, food items we don't handle. Again, focusing on what makes sense in terms of the value, the infrastructure of our facilities. But we know food banks all over the country, in fact, all over the world.
Yeah.
If I have to solve a problem in Canada, I will call our colleagues, and there is somebody that knows about what we do. And the value of that, to your point earlier, everyone wins.
I love that, because one of the things about circularity and one of the things about the industry that we are all in, because there's different verticals, there's different disciplines, but it's the networking and the collaboration.
Yeah.
Collaboration makes circularity happen. And particularly where you are, because it requires a collaboration of a number of donations, a number of organizations, and then your own internal processes.
It's so interesting when we think about how we evolve, because I was mentioning we evolved. When we started, EAL Green had only this purpose of helping a college lower their operating expenses so they can actually, I just thought about that, repurpose those savings and help a student. And that was my case. W.W. Granger donated 2 motors. They went to North Park College. They saved money, giving me a scholarship, which just rewrote my entire life. And we have done that time over time over time. But it took us a while to figure out what we were very, very good at. And the things that, one of the things that I have had to learn, we talked a bit about today, is the ability to know your business well enough to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because
I love that.
there are, back to
Hard
the,
thing to do.
it is very hard to do. It's very hard to do for lots of different reasons. But the intention for those of us in sustainability and circularity is that we are passionate, we realize the waste, we want to do something about it. But if you really take a broad view, you won't solve any problems. You will create more waste. And in economics, there's something called the opportunity cost. You may be inadvertently helping the narrative that this is just fluff. You need to show results. You need to measure what you're doing, and you have to tell the world that you are doing it well.
Yeah, great. Well, you blessed us earlier today with your presence. We are trying to go through and make a difference ourselves, and one of the ways that we're attacking that is through education. So today was the first version of a masterclass essentials. Peter and I have been traveling the world, going through and trying to educate the next generation and leaders on how circular logistics and platforms work together. But you're a very busy person, you're a very accomplished person, and you took some time out of your day to go through and participate in the masterclass. I guess 2 questions on that. Why did you choose to take that class? And what was one of your key takeaways from it?
Choosing to take that class feeds my need and my desire to continue to learn. It is very rare that you can take a class and receive a certificate, which is another thing that I love to do, which is credentials. Demonstrate that you have the skill. And a credential, as modest as it might be, a certificate, it speaks volume that you are taking the time to teach us, and we sit through the discipline of that. So for me, taking that while I am here in Las Vegas, directly from the professors, the faculty, Deborah. I met Deborah Dole online 5 years ago, and today we said hello for the first time in person, like an old friend.
Yes.
So taking the class, I encourage 2 things. Try to do that at almost every conference, because people already take a plane to be there. It's a conference that you just need to focus on your schedule and get it done. So it's a very, very good idea to have that offer. What I took away was a couple of things. Number one, that on the one level, I don't have a master's degree. I love to learn. I read a lot. I follow thought leaders. There's nothing more persuasive than the numbers. The United States economy works on metrics and numbers. And when you show trends and when you show how fast things are moving, you really have to inspire a smaller number of people. The large majority of individuals will see the trends and will see the fancy words, but they will begin to understand how we fit into that space. So today was an eye-opening in terms of, there was a chart, I think Professor Evans, Dr. Evans, put up on the screen that showed about the longevity of different items per category. And since we at EAL Green focus on infrastructure, it caught my attention that let's say a piece of HVAC equipment may have a longevity of 15 years. So they're not going to be buying that every year. So how do you keep a college or a university excited about checking the EAL little website every day on Tuesdays and Thursdays or Fridays when they receive an announcement? Well, you think about what else do they need? They need cleaning products. They need paper goods. They're helping students not only learn inside the classroom, but there are studies upon studies that you can only learn if you are safe, if you are nourished, and if you are in a clean environment.
Somewhere to live, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is a privilege and an honor to advocate for, because that is a gift that changed my life. And that is what I like to do. And what you did today in the class, many comments were, a master class has a level of authority already by the name. And learning from those who are writing the narrative, who are the protagonists of the story, is you can then look back and say, oh, I was part of that pioneer effort.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. One of the things we haven't yet covered is that EAL Green have helped 25,000 students.
Yes.
I mean, that's such a huge achievement. But one of the things that I really want to get across to our listeners today comes back to across the circular loop of intention. So, Claudia, please, let's use our vehicle today to say, what do EAL Green want? What do you need in order to help continue to fund places for students in education?
2 things. We talked a little bit about the supply, and we also talked about the demand. So on the supply side, we need and want and welcome large-scale donors. So this is a business-to-business solution. So if you are the wholesale distributor, manufacturer of products that could find their way onto a college campus, we would ask you to have the intention to do something good with that excess inventory, and consider talking to somebody that can help you by becoming a little bit of an extension of your own supply chain.
Yeah.
Our best solution is when we partner with the donors, and they don't even have to put a lot of energy in dealing with that excess inventory. On the other hand, what we really love are colleges and universities that are able to break down silos, because if you think about a college campus, you have physical plant, you have financial aid, and the EAL model bridges that gap.
Yeah.
So for us, we love donations of products that can go to be used on a college campus or can be repaired, or if they need to be recycled as part of the donation. We always think about this. There's a lot of waste, but there's some treasure. So when a donor has to find the intention to be good with what they're doing and finding a solution, we always say, as long as there is a little bit of treasure in there that can create value. And that means that we may have a forklift, and the rest of the trailer is stuff that we are going to have to sort through quality, condition, application. But it is the mix of products that for us, donors tend to have a relationship, because for 42 years, we have been working with the same donor, the same college, and the same very first student still connected.
Ta-da.
So for 42 years, we have been honoring that mission that we have to convert something into value to help a human being.
I love people who have a superpower of finding value in things that someone else doesn't want.
Yes.
Is there a tax donation? Is there a benefit to the to
Yes.
people that donate the equipment?
Yeah. So colleges and universities are already a nonprofit organization. The benefit to them is that they are acquiring or they're receiving this product. For corporate donations, it's interesting. The IRS does not allow nonprofits to give financial or tax advice, but we will say that all our donors receive a tax donation, and it's an enhanced donation. So there are technical terms to understand how a donor can benefit their bottom line, because it's a tax donation that they can deduct from the amount that they pay at the end of the year. And if I may follow up, Rich, a little bit on that question. You know, at the very beginning of this story, tax donations were key to the decision of donating. Over time, it became an issue of cost management. What do we do with all this inventory? And now it has evolved into supply chain efficiency. While you do have a financial advantage, and it is good for nonprofit organizations to have relationships with corporations, the relationship that EAL has, and I think that was a pivotal moment, was that when we approached our relationship with Fortune 500 companies as a charitable partner, it was more complicated to make that case, because foundations at a corporate level, they are not making those decisions. Foundations, a corporate foundation is writing a check.
Yeah.
It is supply chain, it's surplus, it's the reverse logistics team, and they're not really close to charitable corporate donations. So that is a very interesting dilemma. Yeah. It was not until we began to get very educated on reverse logistics, supply chain, and became more aligned with the functional organizations within larger corporations. Of course, you have to have the blessing of the CFO, and in our case, the CEO. But when you are able to make that connection, the charitable aspect is important, but I don't believe that is any longer a driver. There are many other ways in which corporations dealing with billions of dollars of inventory can meet their corporate responsibility.
Multiple ways to win.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. So, Claudia, one item that we do on every podcast, we ask a guest to bust a myth. So is there a myth in and around the charity sector, the nonprofit sector, anything that you've come across that you would like to bust for us and for our listeners today?
There is a myth that the nonprofit sector isn't as proficient or skilled or assertive or progressive in the solution of problems. There's a myth. There's a myth about that, and I will tell you an example. We talked a little bit about my lovely blue suit today. And the reason we talked about my lovely blue suit is because I told my daughters that when I go around the world to speak about circular economy, surplus materials, I always like to say that all my outfits come from secondhand stores. And my daughters were very concerned, and they said, Mom, the public is going to think that because you work in a nonprofit, they don't pay you enough. So there is another myth. And that is something that nonprofit organizations have to constantly be combating. And so in living your truth, you can work in the nonprofit sector, you can give back, you can actually be a leader. But one of the myths is that nonprofit sector doesn't have professionals, that you are a professional in the work in the nonprofit sector, maybe because you couldn't make it in the real world. There's nothing further from the truth.
Yeah, I've been in reverse logistics operations and business operations all across the world. And watching you interact in the class today and the conversation that we are having right now, I wouldn't put anyone at an advantage over you or your team in this space. It's been a pleasure to have you on All Things Circular and learning a lot about EAL Green. But for those of our listeners that want to learn more about EAL Green or talk to you specifically or reach out, how can they find you?
First, through the podcast. Please repeat it, follow, share, and get the network growing.
You just made Damien's day.
I love it. And I mean it sincerely. As I mentioned, many of my connections have been made through the digital space. Invest on your profile on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to contact me on LinkedIn, they can find me, Claudia Freed, at CEO EAL Green, or they can go to our website, www.ealgreen.org. We added .org because we're a charity. Reach out, ask for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Let's talk, connect. But the podcast is a fantastic medium. I was giving a conversation, a similar podcast. They don't have cameras or sound, but it was a radio in Argentina. And somebody mentioned about the Chile connection. So I took a note. This is a global space growing rapidly. And it is opportunities like this that are going to help us all be closer to each other, caring for each other and the planet even more realistically, because it's very difficult to ignore when you can look at the other person in the face. It's very difficult to ignore when you know that they are doing the right thing. So work with good people, connect with friends like you all over the world, and have gratitude, because that's how I feel today.
I love it. So as we close this podcast out, I'm actually going to do a call to action. Because, EAL Green is a nonprofit. They do need donations. You heard Claudia say anything that can find its way onto a college campus is of interest. It would be reused, it would be repaired, or it would be recycled. But those donations will fund the education for those that can't afford it. And it's really, really important. It's the perfect message for circularity. So, Claudia, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been my honor. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you for listening. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. Please head over to allthingscircular.com to learn more.